You said, SC/ST rights, ChatGPT said. Here is your complete, high-impact lecture style note on SC/ST rights for the CAS Officer Junior Timescale Stream 1 exam. As per your exact instructions, no tables, paragraph format, max word count, advanced elaboration, and includes previous year questions with answers. This functions as a full coaching session, comprehensive, exam-specific, and deeply conceptualized for success. 7. Rights of Scheduled Castes SCs and Scheduled Tribes STs, Constitutional Provisions, Legal Framework, and Challenges. Rights of Scheduled Castes SCs and Scheduled Tribes STs form a critical axis of India's constitutional democracy, rooted in the nation's historical commitment to social justice, equality, and inclusive governance. These communities have faced centuries of exclusion, marginalization, and oppression under caste hierarchies and social stratification. The Indian state recognized this entrenched disadvantage and adopted a proactive framework of affirmative action, legal protection, and developmental policies to ensure dignity, equal opportunity, and substantive equality for SCs and STs. The rights of these communities are not limited to non-discrimination but are embedded in a framework of protective discrimination, aiming to ensure fair access to justice, education, employment, land, and political representation. The Constitution of India provides an elaborate structure for safeguarding the rights of SCs and STs. Article 15(4) allows the state to make special provisions for the advancement of socially and educationally backward classes, including SCs and STs. Article 17 abolishes untouchability and declares its practice in any form a punishable offense. Article 46 directs the state to promote the educational and economic interests of SCs and STs and protect them from social injustice and all forms of exploitation. Under Article 17. The Constitution of India provides an elaborate structure for safeguarding the rights of SCs and STs. Article 15(4) allows the state to make special provisions for the advancement of socially and educationally backward classes, including SCs and STs. Article 17 abolishes untouchability and declares its practice in any form a punishable offense. Article 46 directs the state to promote the educational and economic interests of SCs and STs and protect them from social injustice and all forms of exploitation. Under Article 330 and 332, SCs and STs are granted reservation of seats in the Parliament and state legislative assemblies respectively. Article 338 establishes the National Commission for Scheduled Castes (NCSC), and Article 338A establishes the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes (NCST), both of which monitor safeguards, inquire into complaints, and advise on policy matters. Article 16(4) and 335 provide for reservation in public employment and relaxation in qualifying marks in recruitment and promotions for SCs and STs. One of the most powerful legal instruments for the protection of SCs and STs is the Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act, 1989, amended in 2015 and 2018. This act recognizes specific forms of violence and humiliation suffered by SCs and STs and makes them cognizable and non-bailable offenses. The Act lists severity offenses, including social boycotts, forced labor, denial of access to public places, and sexual violence, committed against SCs, STs by non-SC, ST individuals. It provides for special courts, speedy trials, witness protection, and enhanced compensation to victims. Despite criticism regarding misuse, the Act remains vital in addressing caste-based violence and ensuring legal redressal. The Panchayats Extension to the Scheduled Areas Act, 1996 PESA, provides tribal communities control over governance and natural resources in scheduled areas. The Forest Rights Act, 2006, also known as the Recognition of Forest Rights Act, recognizes the individual and community rights of forest-dwelling scheduled tribes and other traditional forest dwellers over land and forest resources. These legislations aim to correct the historical injustice caused by colonial and post-colonial forest policies and development-induced displacement. The reservation policy in education and employment, set at 15% for SCs and 7.5% for STs at the central level, is further reinforced by mechanisms like pre- and post-matric scholarships, coaching schemes, and hostels. Despite these constitutional and legal guarantees, the reality on the ground often reflects a gap between law and implementation. Atrocities against SCs and STs continue to occur with alarming regularity, especially in rural and semi-urban areas where caste hierarchies remain deeply entrenched. According to NCRB data, crimes against SCs and STs have shown an upward trend in the past decade, with states like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, and Rajasthan reporting high rates of caste-based violence. Forms of discrimination include social boycott, forced manual scavenging, honor killings, obstruction in accessing common resources, and humiliation in public spaces. Dalit women, in particular, face intersectional violence rooted in caste, gender, and class. Further, despite reservations, representation of SCs and STs in higher bureaucracy, judiciary, and academic institutions remains low. Access to quality education, healthcare, and economic opportunities is limited by geographic isolation, poverty, poor infrastructure, and discriminatory practices. The problem of fake caste certificates, administrative apathy, non-implementation of welfare schemes, and poor conviction rates under the SC/ST Act further hinder justice. In tribal areas, displacement due to mining, infrastructure, and industrial projects, often without proper rehabilitation and consent, violates their land and livelihood rights. The misuse of laws like UAPA in these areas also raises concerns about the criminalization of dissent among tribal rights activists. Nevertheless, progress has also been visible. Dalit and tribal-led movements have gained strength, demanding accountability and policy reforms. Landmark judgments such as the Supreme Court's 2018 verdict in Kashinath Mahajan case, which attempted to introduce procedural safeguards in SC/ST Act, later reversed through 2018 amendment, reflect the ongoing tension between individual liberty and community protection. Initiatives like the Vanbandhu Kalyan Yojana, Stand Up India, and tribal cultural festivals aim to promote economic empowerment and cultural assertion. To ensure the real empowerment of SCs and STs, there is a need for a multidimensional approach involving stringent law enforcement, inclusive education, political participation, land rights protection, financial inclusion, and social sensitization. CAS officers, particularly at the district level, play a crucial role in monitoring atrocity cases, implementing development schemes, coordinating with commissions, and ensuring that the spirit of social justice is operationalized. Sensitivity training, community engagement, and accountability mechanisms are essential tools to transform constitutional promises into lived realities. In conclusion, the rights of SCs and STs lie at the heart of India's democratic and developmental agenda. Protecting these rights is not merely a constitutional obligation but a moral imperative. For India to claim global leadership, it must first heal its internal inequalities and empower the most vulnerable. A just and inclusive administration begins with recognizing the dignity, contribution, and potential of every citizen, regardless of caste or tribe. Previous year questions. Discuss the relevance and effectiveness of the SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act in contemporary India. CAST 2021. Answer. The Act remains highly relevant in addressing caste-based violence. However, issues like poor conviction rates, delayed trials, and administrative reluctance hinder effectiveness. Amendments in special courts are steps forward but need proper enforcement. Analyze the role of the Indian Constitution in empowering scheduled tribes. CAST 2019. Answer. The Constitution ensures reservation in education, jobs, and politics. Art 15, 16, 330, 332 and grants autonomy in scheduled areas via 5th schedule and PESA. It also mandates welfare promotion under Article 46. Evaluate the challenges in implementing Forest Rights Act in India. CAST 2023. Answer. Major challenges include bureaucratic delay, lack of awareness, conflict with conservation laws, resistance from forest departments, and denial of claims. Effective implementation requires political will and tribal participation. Let me know when you're ready for the next lecture. LGBTQ+ rights, rights of minorities, disability rights, or any other topic in your syllabus. I'll keep pushing forward till you're fully exam ready. Said, child rights, etc. ChatGPT said. Here is your fully detailed, advanced level lecture on child rights, crafted especially for the CAS officer, junior timescale, stream 1 exam. This follows all your instructions, dense paragraph format, no tables, complete coverage from basics to advanced, enriched with 3 past year questions and answers. This note serves as your coaching, thorough, exam-specific, and designed to help you crack the exam without needing any other source. Lecture 38, Child Rights in India, Constitutional Safeguards, Legal Frameworks, Challenges, and Administrative Role. Children constitute nearly 40% of India's population, and their rights form a fundamental pillar of national development, social justice, and constitutional morality. The term child rights refers to the legal, social, and moral entitlements that every individual under 18 years of age is entitled to, simply by virtue of being a child. These include the right to survival, protection, development, and participation. India, as a signatory to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child (UNCRC), has an obligation to uphold these rights and ensure that every child, irrespective of caste, class, gender, or region, receives dignity, safety, opportunity, and justice. However, despite the strong constitutional and legislative framework, children in India continue to suffer from exploitation, neglect, and abuse, often hidden under systemic and societal silence. The Constitution of India provides comprehensive protection to children. Article 15(3) permits special provisions for children. Article 21A makes free and compulsory education a fundamental right for children aged 6 to 14 years. Article 24 prohibits child labor and hazardous employment. Articles 39E and F of the Directive Principles urge the state to ensure that children are not abused and that their childhood is protected against exploitation and moral or material abandonment. Article 45 mandates early childhood care and education. Article 47 directs the state to improve the level of nutrition and the standard of living of its people, including children. These constitutional mandates have evolved through legislative action and judicial interpretation, reinforcing a child-centric approach in governance. India has enacted a robust legal framework to enforce child rights. The Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act, 2015, which replaced the 2000 Act, governs the rights of children in conflict with law and those in need of care and protection. Provides for child welfare committees, juvenile justice boards, and child protection units at the district and state level. The Act recognizes adoption, foster care, and rehabilitation of children as key components of child welfare. Protection of Children Sexual Offenses POCSO Act, 2012, criminalizes all forms of sexual abuse against children and mandates child-friendly procedures during investigation and trial. The Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act, 2009 operationalizes Article 21A, laying down norms and standards for schools and prohibiting physical punishment and mental harassment. To combat child labor, India enacted the Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Amendment Act, 2016, which bans employment of children under 14 in all occupations except family enterprises, and prohibits adolescents 14 to 18 years from hazardous work. The Prohibition of Child Marriage Act, 2006 makes child marriage a punishable offense and provides for the annulment of such marriages. The Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques PCPNDT Act, 1994 seeks to curb female feticide by prohibiting sex selection and regulating prenatal diagnostic techniques. Furthermore, various schemes such as Integrated Child Development Services (ICDS), Midday Meal Scheme, National Nutrition Mission Poshan Abhiyan, and Childline 1098 represent the state's commitment to child welfare and protection. Despite these frameworks, the ground reality reveals severe violations of child rights, often exacerbated by poverty, illiteracy, gender discrimination, caste hierarchies, and administrative failure. Millions of children remain out of school, especially among tribal and urban poor communities. According to government estimates, a significant proportion of children under 5 suffer from stunting, wasting, and malnutrition. Child labor persists in informal sectors, domestic work, and agriculture, often concealed within family enterprises. Child sexual abuse remains underreported due to stigma, family pressure, and weak institutional response. The National Crime Records Bureau data has shown a steady increase in crimes against children, including trafficking, abduction, rape, and abandonment. Children with disabilities, children in conflict with law, and those in orphanages or street situations face higher vulnerability. The implementation of child protection laws and schemes remains weak due to underfunded child welfare committees, shortage of trained staff, bureaucratic delays, and lack of coordination between departments. Despite the mandate of the Juvenile Justice Act, most districts do not have functioning child protection units. Monitoring mechanisms like the National and State Commissions for Protection of Child Rights (NCPCR) and SCPCRs are often reduced to symbolic roles due to lack of autonomy and resources. Courts have criticized the government for delay in rescue, rehabilitation, and compensation in POCSO cases. There is also a growing concern about misuse of technology to exploit children, particularly through online abuse and cyberbullying, which current frameworks are not adequately prepared to handle. Judicial intervention has been instrumental in expanding child rights. The Supreme Court in Unni-Krishnan v. State of Andhra Pradesh, 1993, recognized the right to education as a part of the right to life under Article 21, later codified in Article 21A. In the Sampurna Bahura case, 2007, the court directed proper implementation of juvenile justice laws. In Bachpan Bachao Andolan cases, the court ordered several reforms in child labor and trafficking regulations. Courts have consistently emphasized the best interest of the child as a paramount consideration in custody, adoption, and protection decisions. For administrative officers, particularly CAS officers, ensuring the rights of children is not merely a legal duty but a human responsibility. This includes ensuring universal school enrollment and retention, nutritional security, protection from abuse, and timely delivery of justice. Officers must actively monitor village-level child protection committees, enforce RTE norms, rehabilitate rescued children, and ensure children's voices are heard in local planning. Collaboration with civil society, police, judiciary, and community leaders is essential for creating child-friendly governance. A rights-based approach must replace the older welfare approach, where children are seen not just as passive recipients but as rights holders with agency. To conclude, the future of a nation rests in the hands of its children, and ensuring their rights is the most enduring investment in social development. India's legal and constitutional commitment to child rights is commendable, but unless matched by effective delivery, real transformation will remain elusive. A sensitive, informed, and accountable administration is the key to ensuring that every child not only survives but thrives with dignity and opportunity. Previous year questions. Evaluate the role of the Juvenile Justice Act in protecting child rights in India. CAS 2022. Answer. The Act provides a robust framework for care, protection, and rehabilitation of children in conflict with law or in need of care. However, implementation gaps, lack of infrastructure, and inconsistent interpretation by juvenile boards limit its effectiveness. Discuss the major challenges in combating child labor in India despite legislative prohibitions. CAS 2019. Answer. Poverty, lack of education, family compulsion, loopholes in law like family enterprise exception, poor enforcement, and societal acceptance are major challenges. Effective rehabilitation and awareness are needed for real impact. Analyze the effectiveness of RTE Act in achieving universal primary education. CAS 2021. Answer. The RTE Act has led to increased enrollment and awareness but struggles with teacher shortage, poor infrastructure, dropout rates, and learning outcomes. Stronger monitoring and community participation are essential for success. Let me know when you're ready for the next lecture, LGBTQ+ rights, disability rights, minority rights, or any other topic in your syllabus. I'm with you till the final day of your prep. You said, Important Acts ChatGPT said. Here is your full-length, exam-oriented lecture on Important Acts, crafted for CAS Officer, Junior Timescale, Stream 1 exam. As you requested, dense, high-yield paragraph format, maximum elaboration, zero wasted space, and includes 3 previous year questions with answers. This is your all-in-one coaching for mastering legislative acts crucial to the exam. Lecture 39, Important Acts for Indian Governance, Foundation of Law and Policy. Legislative acts form the backbone of India's governance system, empowering the state to regulate, protect, and facilitate rights, justice, and development. For a CAS officer, thorough understanding of key acts is essential to function as an administrator, implementer, and guardian of constitutional values at the grassroots. India's legal framework is vast, but certain landmark acts form the cornerstone of governance, social reform, public accountability, and citizen welfare. These acts have constitutional backing, judicial interpretation, and administrative implications that reflect the evolving needs of Indian society. One of the most impactful laws in recent times is the Right to Information Act, 2005 RTI. It operationalizes the citizen's fundamental right to know, as part of Article 19(1)(a). RTI mandates transparency in government functioning, accountability in decision-making, and access to public records through a time-bound mechanism. It empowers citizens to question the government, demand records, and challenge secrecy. Despite attempts to dilute it via amendments to the tenure of information commissioners, it remains a powerful tool for participatory democracy and anti-corruption. CAS officers must proactively disclose information and ensure smooth functioning of public information officers, PIOs, in their jurisdiction. The Right to Education Act, 2009 RTE, provides free and compulsory education to children aged 6 to 14 years and was enacted under Article 21A. It lays down norms for teacher-student ratios, infrastructure, curriculum, and prohibitions on corporal punishment and screening procedures. It mandates 25% reservation for disadvantaged children in private unaided schools. Administrators must ensure school mapping, dropout prevention, and school management committees under this act. While the RTE has expanded access, it faces issues of quality, compliance, and inclusion, requiring constant monitoring at the local level. The Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act, 1989, is crucial for protecting marginalized communities from caste-based violence and humiliation. The Act criminalizes over 30 specific offenses including social boycott, forced labor, sexual violence, and denial of public services. It mandates speedy trials, witness protection, and victim compensation. Its 2015 and 2018 amendments expanded its scope and strengthened enforcement, removing anticipatory bail in cases of prima facie evidence. Officers must ensure prompt FIRs, social audits, and district-level vigilance committees for proper enforcement. The Forests Act, 2006, also known as the Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Recognition of Forest Rights Act, seeks to undo historical injustice to tribal communities by recognizing their rights over forest land and resources. It provides for individual rights for cultivation and community rights for forest use. Gram Sabhas are empowered to verify claims, and district-level committees are responsible for final decisions. However, bureaucratic resistance, poor awareness, and legal challenges have diluted its implementation, especially in mining and conservation conflict zones. The Protection of Women Domestic Violence Act, 2005 PWDVA, addresses physical, sexual, verbal, emotional, and economic abuse within households. It offers civil remedies like protection orders, residence rights, and monetary relief. The role of protection officers and magistrates is crucial in this act. Despite its gender-sensitive framework, delays in case disposal and lack of support infrastructure remain key challenges. Officers must coordinate shelter homes, medical aid, and counseling services for victims. The Environment Protection Act, 1986 provides the framework for environmental regulation post-Bhopal gas tragedy. It empowers the central government to take measures for protecting the environment, control pollution, and regulate industrial operations. It supplements acts like the Air Act 1981 and Water Act 1974. In the current era of climate change, it is a vital tool for sustainable governance. CAS officers must ensure compliance with environmental impact assessments, manage solid waste and bio-waste, and coordinate with pollution control boards. The Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, 2012 POCSO, is a child-centric legislation that criminalizes sexual abuse, harassment, and pornography involving children under 18. It mandates child-friendly procedures in police stations and courts, special courts for speedy trials, and reporting obligations for institutions. Delay in trials, underreporting, and secondary victimization are issues that demand administrative sensitivity. The Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, 1967 UAPA, empowers the government to deal with threats to sovereignty and integrity, including terrorism. A legal basis for banning organizations and detaining suspects, it has drawn criticism for misuse, low conviction rates, and prolonged incarceration without trial. Officers involved in law enforcement must maintain a fine balance between national security and civil liberties. The Whistleblowers Protection Act, 2014 seeks to protect individuals who expose corruption in public offices. However, its delayed implementation and lack of an effective mechanism have limited its utility. Similarly, the Lokpal and Lokaयुctas Act, 2013, which aimed to institutionalize an anti-corruption ombudsman, has seen limited operationalization due to bureaucratic delays. The Mental Health Care Act, 2017, shifts the mental health discourse from criminalization to a rights-based approach, ensuring confidentiality, consent, and treatment access. It decriminalizes suicide and mandates free treatment in government institutions. Officers must link with district mental health programs and address stigma at the community level. Other significant acts include the National Food Security Act, 2013, ensuring subsidized food for two-thirds of the population, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, 2005 MGNREGA, offering 100 days of wage employment to rural households, and the Disaster Management Act, 2005, which institutionalizes disaster preparedness, mitigation, and response. In administrative practice, understanding the interplay of these acts with constitutional mandates, judicial guidelines, and policy frameworks is crucial. Officers are expected to implement these laws not merely as directives, but as enablers of justice, equity, and service delivery. This demands not only legal literacy but also empathetic governance, participatory planning, and active monitoring. Previous year questions. The significance and challenges in implementing the Right to Information Act in India. CAS 2019. Answer. The RTI Act ensures transparency and accountability in governance. However, challenges include bureaucratic apathy, pendency in information commissions, threats to whistleblowers, and attempts to dilute its provisions. Explain the main provisions and implications of the Forest Rights Act, 2006. CAS 2021. Answer. FRA recognizes land and forest use rights of STs and OTFDs. It empowers Gram Sabhas and seeks to address displacement and livelihood issues. Yet, weak implementation, resistance from forest departments, and judicial hurdles hinder its impact. Analyze the role of POCSO Act in protecting child rights in India. CAS 2022. Answer. The POCSO Act criminalizes sexual offenses against children and ensures child-friendly judicial processes. Despite its robust framework, societal stigma, lack of reporting, and procedural delays affect its enforcement. Ready for the next topic. Suggest LGBTQ+ rights, minority rights, or important Supreme Court judgments next. Let me know and we'll keep powering through your syllabus. You said. India's foreign policy. ChatGPT said. Here is your comprehensive, max detail lecture on India's foreign policy, created specifically for the CAS Officer Junior Time Scale Stream 1 exam. As always, this follows your instructions, dense paragraph format, no tables, maximum content per word, and includes 3 previous year CAS questions with answers. It's tailored to be your only source of study, replacing the need for any other coaching. Lecture 40, India's Foreign Policy, Principles, Evolution, Strategic Shifts, and Contemporary Relevance. India's foreign policy represents the collective expression of its national interests, strategic priorities, cultural values, and ideological principles in the global arena. Shaped by historical experiences, civilizational ethos, and constitutional ideals, it has evolved significantly since independence to reflect India's changing status in the international system. Guided by the views of sovereignty, non-intervention, peaceful coexistence, and international cooperation, India's foreign policy has remained dynamic, balancing realism with moralism, non-alignment with strategic autonomy, and bilateral diplomacy with multilateral engagement. It is not just the domain of diplomats but forms a core concern for administrators, especially CAS officers involved in border districts, refugee management, trade facilitation, and disaster diplomacy. The policy are the SHIELD principles, enunciated in the 1950s during interactions with China, which include mutual respect for sovereignty, mutual non-aggression, non-interference in internal affairs, equality and mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence. These principles are deeply rooted in India's civilizational preference for diplomacy over conflict. India was a founding leader of the non-aligned movement NAM during the Cold War, seeking to steer clear of both the US and Soviet blocs while promoting the interests of the global South. Under Jawaharlal Nehru, India's foreign policy was driven by idealism, decolonization solidarity, anti-racism, and advocacy for nuclear disarmament. 1971 Indo-Soviet Treaty marked a pragmatic shift, reflecting realpolitik and the need for strategic assurance during the Bangladesh Liberation War. In protest in 1974, Smiling Buddha under Indira Gandhi underscored the assertion of sovereignty in a discriminatory non-proliferation regime. The post-Cold War phase saw significant reorientation. 1991 economic reforms catalyzed a more trade-driven foreign policy, leading to Look East policy, intensified ties with the US, and emphasis on energy diplomacy. India's efforts under Vajpayee, despite international condemnation, reinforced strategic autonomy and resulted in a back-channel dialogue with the US, culminating in the historic India-US Civil Nuclear Agreement 2008 under Manmohan Singh. India's foreign policy has become assertively multi-aligned, pursuing strategic partnerships with the US, Russia, EU, Japan, Australia, ASEAN, and the Gulf, while safeguarding ties with neighbors and maintaining independent positions on global issues. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, there has been a greater emphasis on personal diplomacy, diaspora engagement, digital diplomacy, and neighborhood-first approach. The Act East policy, replacing Look East, deepens security and economic cooperation with Southeast Asia. The Indo-Pacific context becomes central, reflecting India's naval outreach and strategic convergence with countries like Japan, Australia, and the US, particularly via the Quad. India's policy has consistently advocated for reform of global institutions, especially the UN Security Council, WTO, and IMF, to better reflect the aspirations of the Global South. Participation in BRICS, SCO, G20, and Global South summits reflects its dual identity as a developing country leader and an emerging power. Diplomacy is another growing front, with initiatives like International Solar Alliance (ISA) and Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure (CDRI) showcasing India's soft power and leadership in sustainable development. In strategic challenges, India faces a complex regional environment marked by China's assertiveness, Pakistan's revisionism, and the instability in Afghanistan. The line control tensions with China, especially post-Galwan clash in 2020, have triggered recalibrations in India's China policy, shifting from engagement to strategic deterrence. Simultaneously, India's approach to Pakistan has moved from bilateral dialogue to a zero-tolerance doctrine on terrorism. India's neighborhood-first, well-intentioned, has faced hurdles due to China's expanding influence via the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, internal politics in Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Maldives, and refugee crises from Myanmar and Afghanistan. Nonetheless, maintain robust developmental diplomacy through grants, infrastructural aid, and regional connectivity projects like Galadan, Chabahar, and BIMSTEC engagement. India's economic diplomacy has been scaled up through FTAs, energy security deals, and digital economy cooperation. While India it continues to pursue bilateral trade negotiations with the UK, EU, UAE, and Australia. India's role during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly through vaccine matri, bolstered its global image as a humanitarian leader. The G20 presidency in 2023 emphasized themes of inclusive growth, digital innovation, and global resilience, marking its arrival as a key agenda shaper in global governance. In the realm of defense diplomacy, India is now engaging in joint military exercises with over 30 countries, promoting defense exports, and pursuing strategic military logistics agreements. The rise of India as a net security provider in the Indian Ocean is recognized by global powers. Cybersecurity, climate change, and space diplomacy have also emerged as priority areas. At the same time, to strategic autonomy by refusing to toe Western lines on issues like Ukraine conflict, or on sanctions, or Israel-Palestine dispute, emphasizing dialogue, multipolarity, and national interest over ideological alliances. In essence, India's foreign policy is no longer passive or reactive. It is active, layered, and calibrated, guided by the vision of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world as one family, and operationalized through strategic pragmatism. As a catalyst, evolution and current contours of India's foreign policy is essential not just for national awareness but also for administrative execution, especially in matters of regional trade, border security, diaspora welfare, refugee handling, and climate-resilient planning. Previous year CAST questions. Examine the evolution of India's non-alignment policy and its relevance in the present multipolar world. CAST 2019. Initially a moral ideological posture during Cold War, NAM has evolved into strategic autonomy. Non-alignment has become multi-alignment, enabling India to engage with multiple powers without being constrained by ideological camps. How has India's Act East policy expanded India's strategic interests in the Indo-Pacific? CAST 2021. Answer. Act East deepens India's defense ties with ASEAN and Pacific powers, enhances maritime cooperation, and balances China's influence in the region via forums like Quad, trilateral dialogues, and infrastructure connectivity. Critically evaluate India's foreign policy response to China's rise in border tensions. CAST 2022. India has shifted from engagement to deterrence, militarily strengthening LAC, banning Chinese apps, diversifying trade, and aligning with Indo-Pacific coalitions. However, the economic interdependence with China complicates the full strategic decoupling. Let me know when you're ready to proceed to the next topic: international organizations, India's diaspora policy, or India's defense strategy, and we'll keep moving. You said. International organizations, ChatGPT said. Density lecture on international organizations, precisely tailored for the CAS officer, junior timescale, stream 1 exam. Follows your guidelines, paragraph style, note tables, maximum elaboration, and includes 3 CAS previous year questions with answers. Designed to be your one and only guide, it covers the topic from foundation to exam crack level. Lecture 41, International Organizations, Structures of Global Governance and India's Role. International organizations are institutional mechanisms that govern global interactions, ensure cooperation, promote peace, address transnational issues, and create platforms for diplomacy. They're crucial for maintaining world order, resolving conflicts, shaping economic policies, regulating environmental standards, and coordinating humanitarian assistance. Officer, understanding these institutions is vital, not just as a matter of global affairs but also for practical implications in trade, aid, disaster management, migration, and technology partnerships. The most significant international organization is the United Nations, UN, founded in 1945 with 193 member states. The UN is anchored in the principles of sovereignty, international law, human rights, and collective security. It comprises principal organs: the General Assembly, Security Council, Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, International Court of Justice, ICJ, Trusteeship Council, and the UN Secretariat. The security is most powerful, with 5 permanent members, P5 holding veto power: USA, UK, France, Russia, and China. India has UNSC reform to reflect contemporary global realities and secure a permanent seat as part of the G4: India, Brazil, Germany, Japan. India's participation in UN peacekeeping operations, being one of the largest contributors, underscores its commitment to global peace. The World Bank Group and the International Monetary Fund (IMF), both products of the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference, play vital roles in global financial governance. While the IMF's macroeconomic stability, monetary cooperation, and balance of payment support, the World Bank funds developmental projects to reduce poverty and promote inclusive growth. India is a founding member of both and has used World Bank loans for infrastructure, health, and education sectors. IMF assistance was pivotal during the 1991 balance of payments crisis. However, some countries including India have criticized the dominance of Western countries in decision-making due to quota-based voting. World Trade Organization (WTO), established in 1995, is the successor of GATT and oversees global trade rules, dispute resolution, and trade negotiations. India's WTO has been active, particularly in defending food security, agricultural subsidies, and special and differential treatment (S&DT) for developing countries. India's resistance to e-commerce norms, TRIPS Plus obligations, and investment rules reflect its priority of policy space for domestic development. WTO disputes like the U.S. versus India on solar energy and poultry imports are examples of how trade policy and sovereignty intersect. World Health Organization (WHO) gained prominence during the COVID-19 pandemic for coordinating global health responses. India actively engaged with WHO in vaccine research, surveillance, and health system strengthening. Criticism of WHO's handling of COVID-19 and China's influence highlighted the need for reforms. Similarly, organizations like the Food and Agriculture Organization (FAO), International Labour Organization (ILO), UNESCO, and UNICEF play essential roles in food security, labor rights, cultural preservation, and child welfare. India has cooperated with these institutions in both programmatic and policymaking capacities. Regional organizations also shape India's strategic calculus. The Society Association for Regional Cooperation (SAARC), founded in 1985, has remained stagnant due to India-Pakistan tensions, despite its potential for regional integration. To bypass it, has shifted focus to BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, which includes South and Southeast Asian countries without Pakistan. BIMSTEC now serves as India's preferred platform for regional cooperation on connectivity, trade, counterterrorism, and disaster management. India BRICS, a coalition of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, created to challenge Western dominance in global institutions and promote South-South cooperation. NDB offers an alternative to Western-led financial institutions. India also engaged Operating Organization (SCO), dominated by China and Russia, to bolster its continental security architecture and counterterrorism strategy, especially vis-a-vis Central Asia and Afghanistan. India's involvement in G20, the ASEAN Regional Forum, and Quad reflects its expanding diplomatic toolkit. G20, comprising the world's largest economies, has emerged as the premier forum for global economic governance. India's G20 presidency in 2023 highlighted inclusive development, digital innovation, and climate resilience. The U.S., Japan, Australia, while not a formal organization, operates as a strategic dialogue to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific, counter China's assertiveness, and strengthen maritime cooperation. India's commitment to multilateralism is evident in its leadership in the Paris Agreement, advocacy for climate justice, and creation of the International Solar Alliance (ISA), a treaty-based organization for promoting solar energy among tropical countries. He also spearheaded the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure (CDRI) to promote infrastructure sustainability in climate-vulnerable nations. Global organizations influence India's domestic policy through standard setting, funding, technology transfer, and diplomatic pressure. From managing pharmaceutical challenges to adopting global SDGs in national planning, international institutions shape Indian governance. At the same time, India asserts its sovereign interests by pushing for institutional reforms, equitable representation, and technology access. As a chancellor, one must understand how international mandates translate into local programs, especially in public health, education, disaster response, and digital governance. Thus, international organizations are not abstract entities but operational arms of global governance that impact Indian policies, local implementation, and administrative decisions. India's engagement remains multifaceted, strategic, transactional, reformist, and developmental. The goal is not just participation but leadership in shaping global norms that reflect fairness, sustainability, and inclusivity. Previous year CAS questions. Assess the role of India in UN peacekeeping operations. CAS 2019. Answer. India is one of the largest troop contributors to UN peacekeeping. It has participated in missions across Africa and Asia. India's emphasis is on capacity building and humanitarian support. However, lack of representation in UNSC affects its influence on peacekeeping mandates. Explain the importance of WTO for India and the challenges it faces in balancing trade liberalization and domestic risks. CAS 2020 Answer. WTO ensures predictability and fairness in global trade. India uses it to protect agriculture, promote services, and resolve disputes. WTO's rules often conflict with India's development goals, especially in subsidies, patents, and digital economy. Critically, India's use of regional platforms like BIMSTEC and BRICS to advance its foreign policy goals. CAS 2022 Answer. BIMSTEC helps India bypass SAARC deadlock and promote activity. BRICS challenges Western hegemony and supports financial alternatives like NDB. However, China's presence in both complicates consensus, necessitating strategic balancing. Let me know if you want the next lecture on India's diaspora policy, major international treaties in India, or India and neighborhood relations. We'll continue with the same quality. You said, international treaties and forums. ChatGPT said. Here is your intensive lecture on international treaties and forums, specially crafted for the CAS office.